Ladies and gentlemen, another edition of Crazy Talks with Wise People. Welcome to our show. If you've noticed, we've got a very common face because he is one of our favorites here in our channel. Why is he our favorite? Because he is one of the masters of hope teachings. I should say that. He's got a blog, he's got a vlog, and recently he authored a book entitled Hope is the Key to Living Through God's Superpower. And the key verse for his book is Colossians 1:27. Christ in you is your hope of glory. Wow, isn't it wonderful? It's very encouraging, isn't it? We are here to encourage you. So, without further ado, let me introduce to you once again, and let's warmly welcome Chet Gladkowski. Chet, welcome.
Well, thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you again and with everyone who's watching. Hello from Central Florida. If you're wondering where that is, go to Disney World and drive south about 30 minutes and you'll run into where we are. So it's a great honor, as I said, and it's of all the topics we could talk about, of all the problems that people are facing, of all the stress and being pulled in so many different directions, hope has got to be one of the most desired topics, but not just a topic for our head, but a topic for our heart, something that we want. And I'd like to tell you, if I may, to start out with, about my own personal hope legacy. Where did hope start for me? We all have a hope legacy, and I'm just going to share mine.
Mm.
As a young teenage boy living in Baltimore, Maryland, it was a Saturday, and I was watching television with my dad. I was on the floor, and my dad was in his chair drinking his favorite cold beverage, and we were watching baseball, the Baltimore Orioles. And the Orioles got behind early, and it didn't look like it was going to be a good game. But
Mm.
then all of a sudden, the Orioles started to come back. One run followed by another. And I'm jumping up and down and yelling and screaming
Mm.
because, as we all know, when you yell at the television, that somehow affects the end of the game.
Mm.
And I'm being facetious, but I'm yelling and screaming because I'm all excited. The Orioles are coming back.
Mm.
And as they get close to tying the game, the other team calls a timeout.
Mm.
And so, I've been jumping up and down, and I turn to my dad, who's sitting there in his chair with his beverage, and he is just sitting there quietly. And I say, Dad, what's wrong? We all want the Orioles to win. They're our home team. Why aren't you rooting? Why aren't you encouraging? Why aren't you being part of it? Don't you have any hope? And he took a drink of his beverage, sat it down, and looked straight into my eyes. And
Mm.
I can still see that face. So many years ago, I still see his eyes. And he said to me, I don't hope because I'll only be disappointed. Let me repeat what my dad said to me. He
Mm.
said, I won't hope because I don't want to be disappointed.
Mm.
And I remember that conversation, and that became my personal hope legacy, meaning there is no hope. Why think about the future? Why look forward to anything? Because the only thing that was out there in front of me would be disappointment. And so that's the way I lived. I was a very hopeless person. And that hopelessness drove me to do things to try to fill that hole in my soul. And it really drove me down into what I would call a moral rabbit hole, and I couldn't get out. because I was hopeless.
Yeah, hold on. Someone's knocking at my door.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, just 1 minute, please. I'll be back. I'm back.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I was talking about that I was down this moral rabbit hole. And it was at that point I had no hope. And I also figured out, at least in my little head, that I was not to blame for any of this. It was all God's fault. It was all somebody else's fault. All of my problems, nothing was my fault, but
Mm,
I was filled with anger and pride.
mm,
And it was out of that that I came. So now I'm a very different person. So the reason I tell this story to you
mm,
is if you're experiencing hopelessness,
mm,
I'm a friend. I get it. I understand. I have not experienced what you have,
mm,
but you understand that I've been there too.
mm,
So that's what drove that through my life, uh, through lots of different things. I Someone told me that Jesus loved me on the
mm,
parking lot of a bowling alley, and
mm.
through a series of steps, I came to see that I was someone God had given all these good things, and I just walked away from him. I turned away from him. I was angry and bitter with him. And some people would say that's the word for sin, and that was me. And I had to deal with that by giving God my sin,
Mm.
and also trying giving to God my attempts to be good and to receive his forgiveness in and through Jesus, through his death and burial and resurrection. And I walked out of that tomb as a new person.
As a new person. Mm,
So that is where my hope journey changed direction. And going through, I'm a little further down the road now, as you can tell by the fact
yeah.
that I don't have any hair. uh, this whole idea of writing about hope started during the pandemic,
Mm,
when I was living in the basement of my mother-in-law's.
mm,
We had gone to live near my parents and my in-laws.
mm,
They were all four of them were in their 90s and
mm.
could not uh, do things for themselves with the pandemic. So we went up to help. And in living in the basement, you know what a basement is? It's a place with no windows
Yeah.
and living in the dark. And I started to write about hope. And this book, Hope is the Key, Living Through God's Superpower, is, if you will, my field goal, my attempt to share this with you and with anyone else who will listen. And the idea behind, I don't have to sit here and give you all of the statistics about hopelessness and depression. They're out there, but more than the statistics, for each number, for each percentage that we read about, there is a broken heart out there. There is a broken life. There is a broken person. And my goal is to be a friend and to be a help to people. Say, I get it. I've been there. I'm like a guy who's just like you, no different, not special, but I have found some food and I have found some refreshing water. And I'm just sharing what I have found to be true.
Mm,
And is that I give that God has made us as people who need hope.
mm,
And we have been draining hope out of our lives,
mm.
and we have to purposefully refill it. I have an electric car. I've got a Tesla. And guess what? The batteries go down. All it has to do is sit in the driveway and the batteries will go down. I purposefully have to plug it in to recharge it.
All
If
right.
you have a, go ahead.
Uh, you said plug it in. So for
Yes,
all of those who are feeling depressed, burned out, depleted of power, powerless, hopeless. So how do they plug in? Because you said plug in and it caught my attention. So how
right.
do we plug in? There are a lot of Christians even who are depressed. There are a lot of Christians who are hopeless. There are a lot of Christians who are problematic. There are a lot of Christians who see the mountains,
Yes,
rather than the road to the mountain. There are a lot of people who are afraid, or afraid of the government, or afraid of war, or afraid of a lot of fears, rumor
yes.
mongering all around, a lot of instability in the world, war, famine, jobless, so on, a lot. So how do they plug in so that they can enjoy the power and the regeneration of God in their life?
Well, the that's boy, you could have just written a introduction to the book for me, because that's exactly what I've gone through in the book. Is what are the steps? There are the book. Let me just show you. This is the book.
Oh,
It's
wow.
it's
Yeah,
available
and
on
I
my
like the color
website,
of the book. You see,
and
I
it's
like the
yep,
color.
and
Hope is the key to.
yep,
Okay, yeah, hope is the key.
and
So how the key, right? So how do we
right.
get the key? How do we get the key? Okay.
Okay, the answer is there are two keys.
The
Okay,
keys.
the first key
First,
is how to receive it. Okay,
how
you
to
have to
receive.
bring it in,
Okay. How to
and
receive the key? Okay.
yeah, and there are 7 steps that
Yeah.
I've put in the book about how to receive
How to
hope.
receive hope?
And the first, I'll just tell you the first. I'll just as an introduction, the first one is that we have to be a person who admits weakness.
Admit.
Hope comes first in weakness. If we think we've got everything together and we think that we know how to do everything, then we're not going to be people who are willing to receive. The first step is to admit need, to admit our weakness.
Yeah.
And there
Aware.
are,
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I think another word for that is awareness.
Yes, good word, awareness. We have to admit our need. If I just say, I am hopeless and woe is me, I'm not open to it.
Mm,
Hopelessness to begin to restore, just like when I plug in my car, I have to admit that I got to plug it in and
right.
I've got to then do those steps. And
Mm,
the first step in receiving hope is to admit my weakness, to admit my need.
yeah.
And so that is the
Let me ask you a question before you go on.
sure.
Um, this is so important. Being self-righteous, feeling like you have got everything, and yet you're already drowning. How do we prepare ourselves, or how do we see the real score in our lives? Because sometimes we're blinded. We just say, okay, you're a god of yourself, you can do it, but we are already drowning, but we don't know. He who knows not and knows not that he knows now not must be kicked, right? It says must be kicked, must be awakened. So how do we awaken people so they get
Uh,
to be aware of where they are at?
I
Yeah.
think the answer is don't listen to me.
Mm,
Okay, don't listen to me.
mm,
Listen to and watch what God did when he ran into people who are hopeless. Look at Genesis 3. We
mm,
have Adam and Eve. Where are they? They're in
mm.
a perfect place, a perfect world. They have everything. They don't, it's all there. It's a perfect environment. They
Mm.
have a perfect relationship with one another. They
Yeah.
have a perfect relationship with God. And
Yeah.
what do?
Mm.
They turn away. They think, I know better,
Yeah.
and I'm going to do what I want to do. And
Rebellion.
what did that do? Rebellion. It
Rebellion.
broke their relationship with God. And then they go hide. Now, how stupid is that? To hide from God. But that's another topic.
Yeah.
So they hide, they make some clothing for themselves because they figure out they're
Mm.
in trouble. And then God comes. And when God comes, what does he do? Does he throw lightning and break an earthquake? Does he bring a tsunami? No. You know what he does? He asks questions. He says, where are you? What have you done? He asks questions. Now, this is to me so fabulous because God knows everything.
Mm.
And yet he asks questions. Why?
Mm.
He didn't need the information.
Yeah.
It was to draw Eve and Adam out, to have them express what was going on.
Mm.
And that's exactly where, when it comes to when I meet a person who is in need of hope, me telling them or showing them a chart or reading a poem to them or quoting a Bible verse, as good as all those things are,
Mm.
and those are all good things. But until I start asking questions
Mm.
and asking them to start coming out, that is the first step. And to be actively listening, to give them the gift of listening.
Mm.
So think about when God asked Adam and Eve questions.
Mm.
First of all, he didn't need the information.
Yes.
Secondly, when he asked, he then didn't just start talking over top of them.
Mm.
He listened.
Mm.
So when we ask the questions, we then have to listen
Listen.
actively, attentively, leaning into them, taking it in. And whatever you do, if the phone rings, ignore it, put it away. And when they say to you, well, aren't you going to get that? You say, what could be more important than being here with you right now? The answer is nothing. I'm
Mm.
going to give you my full attention. So you ask questions and you then begin to say, when they answer, say, well, how did that happen? How is that working out for you? What are your next steps? How did that make you feel? You know, the bring them to the point of admitting that they need help. If once they admit it, then you can say, how about we walk together on being able to share hope. And you come as a student, you never say, I've got all the answers, but just to say, I'm going to show you a screen. This is in the book. Can you see that? It
Yeah.
says hope.
Hope, how to
Okay.
receive hope.
Right. So
First,
this is a graphic, and these are the 7 steps
7 steps.
on
Okay. So
in that first
accepting.
key.
First is accepting. Oh no. Uh,
Weakness
Weakness.
starts with
Okay.
weakness.
So you
Then,
have to be aware of your weakness. Number two.
right, is community.
All right.
Is I I cannot address my weakness alone. I must be in community,
Mhm.
community with God, but community with other people. Because everywhere in life, I am here, but
Mm.
there are some people who are a little further down the road,
Mhm.
and there are some people who are behind me,
Mhm.
who I'm ahead of.
Mhm.
So I need to be in a community where I got people who can help me, but also people that I can help. And no matter where we are, we have people on both sides of us. So that's community.
That's
Then
community.
there's learning. I have to
Learning. Ah.
learn things about myself.
Let me just go back to number two, which is community. Uh,
Sure.
when a person is hopeless, it is always best you recommend that they have to be in a community and in a supportive community.
Yes.
What if the person is an introvert and he doesn't have a community?
The answer is find it.
Mm,
I don't care where you are. There are people near you. If
mm.
unless you're living under a rock and in a cave, and even then, I bet there are people around you.
Yeah, or connect with people through the internet, like we are connecting now, right?
Yes, that certainly is a good option
Mm,
when other avenues are not there. But
yeah.
I would personally try to find people, and through a church, through a community group, find people where I can be transparent, where you can be transparent.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I'm in a group. I meet with some men
Mm,
uh, every Wednesday for lunch,
mm-hmm.
and we have come to the point where we share hard things. There's someone who sat across the table from me the other day, just the other day. And on my right was a gentleman, a good friend of mine, who has gone through cancer, who
Mm,
has had heart troubles,
mm,
who has family troubles.
mm,
And on the other side of him was another gentleman who he and his wife had one son who
mm,
was newly married,
mm,
and the son was tragically killed on
mm,
the roadside when he got hit by a car.
mm,
We have we all go through these things together. And sitting next to me on this other side was a gentleman. He's got life totally wired. He was born into a well-off family. He has a lovely family. His wife is an actress and a producer and director. And he came to the group one day and said, I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's.
mm,
So we all have that. And so we need to find those people. And to find those people, you got to get out. You have to go and look.
mm,
I'm sorry, they're not going to come to your door. Part of the idea of weakness is to say, I need help and I'm willing to do the unusual. I need to take steps to find those people.
mm. All right. Uh, so how does a person how to how to build their hope or faith muscles? Because the
Mhm.
next step is learning. So how do they learn?
Well, you learn, uh, certainly reading is important, watching hopeful videos.
Mm,
Part of learning also is turning off hopeless input. If there are things that take you down,
mm,
emotionally or drain hope from you,
mm,
there comes a time just to stop doing that, stop watching that, stop bringing that into yourself. So learning is both bringing in and pushing out.
right. I
Bring,
agree. I agree. I
uh,
agree to that because whatever we eat becomes a part of us. So whatever we eat spiritually becomes a part of our spirit. Whatever we eat intellectually becomes a part of our intellect. So you're right. We need to learn how to screen our spiritual diet, our intellectual diet, our emotional diet. So so that we need to feed ourselves with the word of God. We need to
ab-
be much closer to God because God is the foundation of hope.
yes, he is.
Mm,
Because if I can, I want to paint a word picture for you
hmm.
and everyone listening,
Yeah.
is that hope and life is
Mm,
like driving a car or sailing on a boat. Okay.
mm,
Uh, I grew up with boats, so I'm going to use the boat one if I may. Behind me is the wake
mm,
of the boat. It's where I've been.
mm,
And the wake of what's behind me is something that's already happened. I can't change it. So you need to remember that those things are in the past and they can't come and get you.
mm,
The other part about the past
mhm,
is the good news.
mm,
What is news? News is not what's happening right now. News is not what's happening in the future. News is always in the past. The good news is about what Jesus has already done. It's finished on the cross. What did he say? It is completion. People tried to get him to come off the cross early. Remember? They're saying, come on down. We'll believe. We'll believe. But he didn't. He didn't believe the lie. He didn't buy the temptation. He stayed on the cross the whole time until all of our sins, past, present, and future, were completely paid for.
right.
So that is important to remember that
Mm,
when Jesus died on the cross,
mm,
all of my sins were taken care of. And
mm,
part of the learning process is the fact that as we live our lives, as I live my life, parts of my past will come into my head. I have no idea why. Maybe it's my brain, maybe it's the enemy. It doesn't matter.
mm,
These ideas, these thoughts of the guilt and the shame come over me. What am I to do? Well, it doesn't do any good to yell at yourself
mm,
or to say, stop that or whatever.
mm,
No, all you're doing is reinforcing that thought.
mm,
What you need to do is worship. You take that thought and you bring it to the cross.
mm,
You say, Jesus, when you died on the cross, this is something you knew about. This is something you died for. This is something that your death paid for.
mm,
And I thank you for that. And in your name and power, I want to live for you because you have done this for me in
mm.
loving response. I want to be the kind of person you want to be, and I'll
Yeah.
live life the way you
Mm,
want.
mm, mm.
So we have what's in the back, the wake. That is the truth.
Yeah.
Where we're sitting right now in the boat or driving in the car is faith. Faith says, I am moving along step by step. I'm living piece at a time, a step at a time. And that is faith. I'm letting faith in God direct and empower the steps that I'm taking right now.
Mm,
But hope is the future. Hope is where I'm headed towards. Hope is the destination.
mm,
Hope is, that's why it's the key, because hope is the key that says, this is where I'm headed. This is the direction of my life. God has a purpose and a plan for me. And to get there by faith, I'm going to use the truth of who he is and what he has done for me. And
mhm.
I'm going to walk each day by faith
By faith.
pointing towards the direction by
Mhm.
of the hope of who he has made me to become.
Yes. All right. I think I one verse that came into my mind was learning how to put our hope in God is very important. Learning how to put our hope in God and not looking back, because there's Roman 8:28. And God said that his words will not come back to him void. So as we speak the word of God, all the more that our faith muscles get stronger.
Mhm.
And as
Exactly.
yes. And then the
And this
fourth,
is,
yeah.
if I
And
can just think about the Apostle Paul for a moment.
yeah.
Who was he?
Mm,
He was a guy when Stephen was being stoned, he
Mm.
held everybody's coats. He
Right.
was there giving approval. He then went out to find Christians, arrest them, have them killed,
Mm.
and then he meets the risen Christ going to Damascus.
Mm.
He then is baptized, he is
Mm.
forgiven, his sight is returned,
Mm.
and he then goes out and starts sharing Jesus and wanting to connect with Christians. Here's the point I want to make.
Mm.
The church was very small.
Right.
So every time the church got together and Paul was there, you have to believe
Mm.
that friends and neighbors and family members of people that Paul had arrested and killed were
Mm.
in the audience.
Mm.
Can you imagine that?
Mm.
And Paul then says, he freely admits it,
Mm.
and he says, I am what I am. He doesn't try to hide it, but he says, yes, that is what I did.
Mm.
And what did he call himself? I am the chief of all sinners.
Yeah.
But why? It shows that grace, the kindness, God's reaching out
Mm.
to him
Mm.
is powerful enough to forgive
Mm.
even Paul.
Mm. Perfect.
So,
Thank you so much. And then, so thank you for sharing with us the first three, the
mhm,
first three key factors on how to receive the key to hope. These are very important things, my friends. You see, according to Chet Gladkowski, I actually coined his name as the father of hope. Right, there you go. So according to him, the first is awareness. You have to accept your weaknesses, because if you will not have this awareness that you need help, then you cannot be helped. So second is, after that, you have to look for someone to speak with. A community is not necessarily big. A community can be, your next neighbor, your husband, your wife, your sister, your brother, your family is your community. Or you can, if you don't have family support, you can go out, to your community. There are a lot of churches out there. I recommend Christian church. Okay. I recommend a Christian church because I've seen a lot of people who've been trapped by all these little, small little cults who would tell you, like, okay, give you hope. You have to pay them every time you visit them, and they hook you up, and they hook you up into nonsense. And what I've noticed, and based on my experience, you go to these people and they deceive you. And when you are deceived, you lose your power. And all the more that you get deceived, and all the more that you backslide, and you lose your hope, because they are connecting you to a fake God, Satan. All right. Next is, according to our guest, learning. So learning how to screen, what comes out, the nourishment, what comes out to your spirit. I mean, what comes in. So it's, spiritual food, intellectual food. These are foods, so these are like what you eat becomes you. So as much as whatever you eat a lot of carbohydrates, then you just get fat and all those kinds of diseases. But if you eat balanced diet, then you become very healthy. It's the same as spiritual nourishment. So yes, there, chat just flashed on the screen. And please don't forget to buy his book on Amazon. All right. So we have 2 minutes, chat, for this podcast. I would like to encourage you to subscribe. Even I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to Chet Gladkowski's what do you call this, to Chet Gladkowski's blog. I'm receiving. I I've studied what do you call that, speed reading, so I could read his post. It's very easy. You can read his post. It's like a 5 minute read. Okay. And he's got a blog, and you can subscribe from that blog to be encouraged every day. Chet has a very friendly spirit. I don't know if he's available for counseling online. Let's ask him on the next podcast. Now, don't forget to buy his book, Chet. May we see on Amazon? It's now on Amazon. Hope is the key. Living through God's superpower. Wow. All right. So it is only 14.95 US dollars. You know, I encourage you to invest on yourself. Investment on books. You have to invest as much as you invest on food, food for the body. Invest on books, especially books like that of Chet Gladkowski. I'm going to buy his book as well because I believe in Chet. I met Chet on LinkedIn, and I've seen his life to be very consistent, and he lives the life of hope. Chet, thank you so much for being with us today, and please be our guest next week. And ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to watch Chet Gladkowski here on our channel next week. All right, Chet, the floor is yours.
Thank you. But it's been an honor to be with you for this time together. When it comes, we started off with the idea that hope in you is Christ in you is the hope of glory. We need to work on our hope. As you just heard, we have to make investments in hope. It isn't just going to fall out of the sky. Yes, when you receive Christ, you receive his spirit, but you still have to read his word. You still have to put hopeful things in.
Mm.
And Christ in you is the ultimate key, the ultimate hope. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, okay. For our podcast next week, we still have four more tips. Four more tips. We've already received the 3 steps. We will be receiving the 4 more steps from Chet next week. Thank you once again. This is Mary Angela Talk for Crazy Talk with Wise People. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope your hope will grow. In the midst of chaos, there is hope. Bye for now.